Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. For those of you who have been returners, thank you again for joining today. Today is our third session for the Graduate Careers Exploration Week on careers in data science and tech. We have three amazing alumni joining us from all over the country. So welcome to our alumni. Just as housekeeping, and for those of you also that I haven't met before, my name is Jennifer Thisneem, and I'm a career advisor here in the School of Chemical Sciences. So I'm really excited about our conversation today because data science and tech, for those of you who don't do, computational things, maybe something not that you consider. So I'm excited to learning more, and I'm sure a lot of you have questions about it. But just as a housekeeping note, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. Or if you want to use the raise hand option in the reactions button in the bottom, you can use that. But if you're uncomfortable asking questions directly, you can also private message me your questions. And as I said before, if you're able to turn on your cameras, please do so. We'd love to see your faces. My role today is just to facilitate our conversation, but I'm gonna mainly turn it over to all of you to ask questions and interact with our alums directly. So ask and think about all of those questions that you wanna ask. So I'm gonna start off by first turning it over to our alumni who are here today to introduce themselves. So if you want to introduce yourself, which labs maybe you were at when you were here at Illinois, and then a little bit about your current role and your current organizations. So Morgan, would you like to start us off first?
Sure. So I'm Morgan Cencer. I was in the Moore group in the chemistry department and graduated with my PhD in materials chemistry last spring. I'm currently a materials data scientist at 3M, working in the corporate research systems lab. And so just to give a brief overview about 3M, you've probably all heard of it. We make a lot of different things in a lot of different spaces. We're perhaps best known for things like Post-it notes, but we like to say that at any given moment, you're within 3 meters of a 3M product because we make a lot of adhesives that go into things like phones, smartwatches, computers, as well as a lot of other components and a lot of other things as well. So my job as a materials data scientist is to provide computational research services to other researchers. So I meet with people who are working on a project. I help them understand the best way to sort of approach their work. If they have enough data, we will do data science. If, as usual, they don't have enough data, we'll work with them to figure out the most effective way to get enough data to do data science. Or I will do simulation and modeling in order to augment the data that we have and help them understand their systems better.
Great, thank you, Morgan. Aastha, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, all. I'm Aastha. I graduated in 2022 from Josh Verawitz's group and in materials chemistry. I'm currently a software research engineer at Intel, and my job is I specifically work in the resolution enhancement technology group where we do optical proximity corrections. And to summarize it, I'm in the data team where we are trying to do a lot of image processing, so analyzing a lot of scanning electron microscopy data set so that we can further enhance and reach Moore's law. Yep, that's all.
Yep, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, my name is Chuan Kai, and I'm currently working at Amazon as a machine learning engineer. I graduated from University of Illinois in 2020. I worked with Professor Diwakar Shukla in chemical engineering. I was mainly doing computational research when I was there and using molecular dynamics simulation to study proteins and small molecules, stuff like that. Yeah, regarding my current role at Amazon, I'm mainly developing machine learning models for placement of sponsored product ads when you are shopping on Amazon, probably when you search something, you see a lot of sponsored products on the list. And basically, we're developing models to predict where to place ads, how many ads we should place, and how much we should charge to the advertisers. And our goal is to achieve higher revenue for Amazon in the meantime, to have a neutral or even more enriching shopper experience for the shoppers on Amazon as well. Yeah, I think that's briefly about my work at Amazon here. Previously, I worked at Bloomberg, where I was a software engineer there and developing data platforms for large-scale data processing for financial analytics, and mainly available on the Bloomberg terminal. Probably not many of us, or if you will be familiar with that product, because that's mainly used by the institutional investors who are using those to get financial information for making investment decisions. So those are the two jobs that I had after I graduated. I'll be happy to chat more about my experience later. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for your introductions. Before students start to ask questions, I just wanted to start off by saying, maybe asking another question there. Could you talk to us a little bit more about your transition into the world of data science and tech? Some of you mentioned you've done computational research here when you were doing your degrees, but some of you may have not have done computational components. So tell us a little bit more about that and that transition into the industry. Morgan, want to start off?
Yeah, sure. So the vast majority of my PhD work was computational, primarily simulation, either kinetics modeling or DFT. And now I'm doing pretty similar work. So, I did some machine learning in grad school, and I've come into a group where I'm doing sort of, the aim is 50-50 data science simulation right now. It's more like 80-20, but so I'm still doing a lot of simulation. It's a very similar thing. Industry obviously, cares about business things in a way that grad school doesn't, but the sort of day-to-day work is actually very similar.
Awesome, thanks. Anyone else want to talk about that?
Yeah, I actually was primarily from an experimental research group, where in Josh's group, we did ultrafast spectroscopy. So I'm an experimental by training, but the instrument that we worked with generated a lot of data and it was very noisy. So during my PhD, I was forced to learn, or I had to learn about signal processing and trying to filter noise, like Fourier transform, so all by myself. And that kind of translated into my current job at Intel, where we are actually analyzing experimental data sets and trying to develop software for analyzing experimental data. That's why it became a natural transition, because I'm still working with experimental data sets, but helping develop software to process that better.
Yeah, for me, my entire PhD research is computational. So I think I did some coding and also developing models. And so I think generally my skill set or background is naturally fitting into my current role. But definitely I have to work hard a lot to fill some gaps there, like to sharpen my coding skills or to learn more about machine learning or data science areas to be able to crack the interviews and things like those. So I think generally, when I was interviewing for jobs, I was not only looking for tech, I also looked for some computational chemist jobs in pharma industries as well. What I find generally is that they also kind of require similar type of skill set, and they probably even ask for more, like you have background in computational chemistry, but they also want you to have background in you're able to code in C++ or Python to write some scalable software, or they might ask you, they might want you to have some machine learning background. It's now very common to apply machine learning in to discover new compound molecules. So I generally feel that basically the skill set that is asked by different industry, they more or less the same. So I don't feel like it's a different industry like right now where I am right now. I think maybe it's just using a subset of skill sets to work in a different area. Yeah.
Great, thank you all for those great responses. Students and postdocs, do you all have questions for our alumni? Okay, so there is a question in the chat. What are some of the technical skills that you needed to learn on the job?
I guess I can start. So in my case, the sort of technical skills has more been a deepening of things I already had. So getting better at coding, getting better at machine learning, taking my simulation skills and applying them to more complex conditions. I'm one of the only people in our lab who does DFT, which means that whenever anybody comes up with a weird and complex and hard DFT problem, they immediately come to me and are like, hey, have you ever done this before? And I'm like, no, give me a few weeks to read the literature and then I'll do the thing for you. So that is mostly just been sort of getting more and deeper into things and really taking the opportunity to learn from everyone around me who's been there for longer and learning like what the sort of internal standards are for code and other such things.
Yeah, I can go next. For me, during my PhD, the code that I wrote in Python were mostly scripts. But now when I'm working at Intel, it's learning how to write production quality code, like where you have to do testing and make sure that your code doesn't break in production. And thankfully, a lot of people in my team who are at Intel, most of them had their PhD in chemistry or material science and are doing coding. So that's why they have in-house like training so that we can learn those skills. And for the first few months, I've just been learning how to automate things, but also learn the basics of codings, such as like unit testing, trying to write clean code, those things that I've learned on the job.
Yeah, I can also add a bit on this. I think generally, a lot of the skills that are required of my job, I just pick up when I start my job, and not necessarily I had those skills before I started the job. But I think it's important to be able to demonstrate that you're able to learn quickly and you have some background for the job. Like for example, for a machine learning engineering in tech, you'd have to demonstrate that you have some experience building machine learning models on some small projects or some research projects you have done in graduate school. And then generally, I think they will be able you'll be able to convince them that if you have a PhD at the University of Illinois, you have the analytical or computational skills to do well in the job. But I think it's important to be able to align with what they're expecting in the job interviews, like the coding skills, problem solving skills, those things. Like as long as you have some background, you can get into the interview and then you prepare well for those interviews, and then probably that's just good enough. And then when you're actually in the job, at least for in tech industry, generally they would give you like a couple of months or even a little longer to onboard to the new role. And they even have some training, like what I have at Bloomberg. I have 3 months of training to learn how to write production code, how to test software at scale, how to ship code to production. And right now at Amazon, like how to, like when you are working on different business problems, the type of machine learning methodologies would be very different too. And you would have to learn from your teammates. So I think it's important to be able to learn quickly. I think that's definitely the skills that you will be able to develop during graduate school training. So I think those things are more important for me, yeah, at least. Yeah.
Perfect. So before we get to the questions in the chat, anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to either unmute yourself or put them in the chat, whatever works. All right, then I'll go to the chat. So there was one question in the chat where a student asked, how does your day-to-day look like in your current role since you wake up, or in the job, I guess?
Guess we'll keep the pattern going. I had to look at my calendar this morning to prepare for this question. And according to my work calendar, I spend 30% of my time in meetings. The rest of the time I'm working on mostly research, some more sort of internal admin things. So I have about 4 different projects that I'm working on. And so part of why I have so many meetings is that all of those projects have meetings. Also for those, I'm doing some of the time I'm doing, literature research, trying to dig into understanding the project space, understand other people's methods. Then I might be setting up some simulations or writing code, either to do machine learning models or even more likely writing code to run analysis or to automate my own systems. And then I also participate in what we call a tech forum, which is our internal organization for essentially sharing technical content. And so I'm part of a couple different groups where we invite outside speakers and we have events and things. And so I volunteer for those. And so I'm part of planning for those, and that we've got an event coming up next month. So that's taking up a bit more time right now. And yeah, I think that kind of covers most of it. I do spend most of my time doing research, and in much the same as grad school, what research is on any given day can vary a fair amount.
Yeah, I had to look at my calendar too this morning to answer this question. So usually I start around 8:30, and I make sure that I don't spend a lot of time checking emails, and I glance at my calendar. So I feel like my projects can be divided into 3 different categories. One is more like execution projects where the code is optimized, but I'm helping to execute it. And then another is more like development projects that I'm working on, where I'm developing new things and developing software to automate or data visualization. And the third one is more like maintenance. I'm in charge of an image processing software that they use for analyzing data sets at Intel. So if anyone has any issue related to the image processing software, then they will file a ticket and I have to ensure that I fix it properly. So it honestly depends on the day and the workload. Usually I try to make sure I do the execution tasks in the morning because I'm not a morning person, and then I focus more on the maintenance and the development tasks in the afternoon. And I make sure that I log off at least by like 5 or 5:30 or 6 so that I can do other tasks.
I'll jump in. I usually start between 7:30 and 8, and I'm usually done between 4:30 and 5.
Yeah, for me, yeah, I guess my working hours are generally looking like 9 to 5 or 9 to 10 to 6, 8 hours per day on average. And yeah, I think I do spend a good chunk of time in meetings, around 30% time, I would say. And you have to, like, some of the meetings are business review meetings and meeting with managers and product managers, discussing what are the priorities and whether we're in progress to deliver on those projects. And some of them are like design reviews, meeting with engineers or other stakeholders to review the design of the project, whether they make sense or not. And then And also some others like you maybe attending some TikToks. It's very common in the industry as well. We listen to some seminars. There are sometimes seminars from the academia or some within the firm, like a lot of people sharing what they have learned, whether they are developing some new tools, new softwares, or new models. Yeah, and it's very common to be able to learn different new skill sets from those kind of activities as well. Other than the meetings, I guess to spend like maybe 40 to 50% of time in doing R&D work, like investigating on the projects, what need to be done, and to accomplish the goals for the project, and then maybe also a good chunk of time coding to implement the solution, and then shipping the code to production, doing a lot of testing before it's good to go, and then maybe the rest of time spending those time in operation type of activities, like we have on-call rotations. So every 2 months you have to be a on-call schedule, and then dealing with a lot of like occasional tickets that you would have to be able to handle those, and like doing code reviews for others, like for your peers. For example, if they have code to be released soon, and then they generally invite all the team members to review their code, and it's also part of the job responsibilities too. Yeah, I think that's generally how it's looking like. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for the deep dives into your days. More questions from the chat, and I'll go to the next one. And I think some of you mentioned this or alluded to this before as well, but was there a preferred programming language, for example, either like Python or C++ that you use frequently in your day-to-day roles?
So I use mostly Python and some Bash. And I'd say within my organization, Python and Bash are the primarily used ones. I mean, we've got people who use other languages when they're building like software, but most of our code is not really production code. Most of it's sort of for ourselves or for a small research group. So that's basically the scientists are all using Python and Bash.
Yeah, in our case, our core software is written in C++, but for automating and all those tasks, we use Python, and everything in our job is done in Linux. So I have to access the virtual machine and do everything, a lot of scripting in Linux so that I can automate things. So writing shell scripts too.
Yeah, for tech industry, I guess you don't really have the option to choose which language to use when you start a project. I guess generally when you join a team, or even when you join a firm, they generally have some preferred language. Like for example, when I was working at Bloomberg, they use C++ a lot, and then for the backend, and then using some JavaScript and for the front end. So I guess I was mostly using C++ and some Python as well when I was there. And then after I joined Amazon, Java is almost the default language. So I have to pick up Java here. And then, yeah, I guess I do use a lot of Python for developing machine learning models as well. And then some other languages depending on the use cases. So I guess, but I think the good news here is that tech industry, they generally don't care about your background, which language is your strongest language. And then you can pick whatever language you want to use in the interviews. And then during your daily job, if you are going to start a project from scratch, you would have to be able to make a decision which language you're going to use, depending on whether you want to get better performance or just easy integration with existing libraries. And then you have to make the call because you are the engineer to be going to work on that. But generally, you're expected to be able to pick up any new language quickly, as long as you are proficient in one language. And I don't feel that's a particularly challenging task. But some language may be tougher, like C++ is maybe taking a little more time to get into that. But I think that's generally the expectation. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Again, before I move on to more questions in the chat, any other questions from our participants here?
I had a question on the work environment. Sounds like all you guys work on teams with other people. Do you find that in general your work environment is more collaborative or more competitive with the teams that you're working on?
I'd say mine is extremely collaborative. I basically everything everyone is doing is collaborative. Occasionally we see a little bit of like project protectionism where somebody is trying to like stake out their claim to some project area, but managers tend to slap that down pretty hard, because 3M's like theory is that the reason 3M is being successful is because we share processes and information and data, and like there's a ton of use of like technology types and discoveries across a really broad range of things. So yeah, very collaborative.
Yeah, I would say my work environment is also very collaborative, and I work in teams, and they also focus a lot on pair programming, where you are not programming alone, but programming with another team member at the same time. So when I was onboarded with another new engineer. So we were learning together, and we still do pair programming together. So sometimes like 3-4 hours on a call where we are sharing screen and doing programming at the same time. So compared to graduate school, it's very collaborative. And if you have any issue, I don't feel hesitant to ask questions to a senior engineer, because time is of essence in industry. You don't have 6 years to work in a single project. Like I cannot, if I have to have the turnover time should be very quick. So I'd rather ask question and get help from others than get stuck for something that can have a huge impact later on.
Yeah, I guess same here, and it's pretty collaborative, and it's generally very common that whenever you are working on a project, you have stakeholders from different teams. You have to work with multiple teams and also multiple team members within the team to be able to deliver a project. And so I think it's really very important to, like, communication would be very important, and also ownership of your projects are very important in this sense. Because like you have so many dependencies on others, you have to be if you are the owner of a project, you have to most of the time you have to drive the progress of these projects. If you have some blocker from other teams, you have to be responsible to reach out to others to track the ETAs. And so those things, I think these kind of soft skills are very important to be able to do well in the daily jobs. I think it generally is it's expected that it's a lot more collaborative, and we do a lot of pair programmings as well. Like, as I said, generally when you are starting a project, you are coming up with design, you have to be reviewed by others, collecting feedback from others. And then when you implement your solutions, you're working with multiple people on that. And then when you have your code to be shipped to production, you would have to get multiple people to look at your code, to review your code, to give feedback for revisions as well. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, David. Anyone else not in the chat who's willing to ask a question or is looking to ask a question?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned that, but I'm curious, when you learn new skill in the company like programming or any other things, does the company provide good resources to refer to, or should we study by Googling ourselves? I'm curious.
It depends on the skill for 3M. Like there's some areas where they know lots of people are going to need to learn that skill. And we have like regularly occurring classes on things like, polymer physics, because you're going to be making pressure sensitive adhesives, you're probably going to need to know about polymer physics. And so there's some things that are really provided for in-house as like a class. There's also, we have access to things like Udemy and other online learning platforms for free. So if it's something like a lot of the coding skills, you can find, classes for like that are free. But also there's a lot of support for taking the time you need to go learn a thing. So if it's necessary to a project and you tell someone like, I got to take the time to go learn that, people will be like, okay. And your manager will support you doing that. So there's a number of different avenues for learning new skills.
Yeah, even at Intel, we have in-house like Intel University. It's like online portal where you can access, and if you can choose a path you want. So let's say you want to be better in machine learning. So there is like a course path for machine learning, and you can follow that at your own pace, and you still have access to O'Reilly, Udemy, all the resources. And the important part is every quarter we have to come up with our objective and key results for that quarter. And in addition to our projects, there is also one category where you have personal objective and key results. So you and your manager work together and figure out what is your objective for this quarter. So let's say my objective in this quarter is I wrote like, I want to be more proficient in test-driven development. So I will read this book. So you just work along with your manager to make sure that you have time to develop your personal skills, which will eventually help in your professional work as well.
Yeah, I think it's the same for the two companies that I worked for before. We do, like at Bloomberg, we have a Bloomberg University as well, basically similar to what Aastha just mentioned. And I think generally it's very important for software engineer to write good documentations as well, like to be able to document what you have developed and how to use them, how to test them, or generally doing more general knowledge sharing. For example, if you spend some time to learn about new technology or a new area, like about database or distributed system or other machine learning, specific machine learning area, you are expected to be able to write some documentation or give a talk to share with the team what you have learned. And there are a lot of trainings from the firm that you can attend. As I mentioned earlier, there are talks from different from academia or within the firm. They are sharing the knowledge all the time. And pretty much for big tech firms, there are experts from all different kind of areas as well. So they will work on different areas in their jobs. They will produce those documentations for internal resource sharing. And yeah, I think generally, and also I think company also intend to be able to provide resources for people to learn. For example, when I was working at Bloomberg, they generally require engineers would also require some understanding of financial concepts. And so they are organizing regular training sessions for people who have no finance background to learn a lot of finance, and some of them even just for personal investing as well. I think those are pretty good and similar for technical areas too. So yeah. And also like at Amazon, for example, I'm learning a lot about cloud computing, and because they have AWS and they provide a lot of free training resources for employees at Amazon to learn about the cutting edge technologies on cloud.
Yeah, thank you.
So moving on to some more questions in the chat. What were some of the criteria that you were considering when you were choosing your current roles?
So I definitely wanted to be in industry. I wanted the sort of regularity of day-to-day and not having to write grant proposals. And then I was interested in a company that would have good computational chemistry being done and also opportunities to do data science And I wanted one that had a good collaborative attitude, and was doing stuff I was interested in, which was mostly sort of soft materials. And 3M kind of hit the bill on all of those. And I'd also done some informational interviews, and I really liked what I'd heard from the materials data scientists at 3M.
Yeah, so personally for me, I wanted to be somewhere where I could do data science, but also be able to leverage my PhD. So right now in Intel, we are trying to make chips with extreme ultraviolet lithography, so EUV lithography, trying to make smaller chips. And during my PhD, I work in Josh's group where I did ultrafast spectroscopy using extreme ultraviolet light beam. So the knowledge that I had in my PhD, although I did not directly use, it was transferable. And even during my interviews, it was very clear that I wanted to work for the team, because in addition to having the technical skills or like the scientific skills background that I got in my PhD, I realized that it was a place where I could learn a lot and grow in my career. So it seemed like a good starting point for my career.
Yeah, for me, I guess I care more about my personal interest and what I'm truly interested about. So I was looking for both computational chemist role, which is more aligned with what I did during my PhD, and also some more technical tech industry jobs. And I just found myself generally more interested in tech and data science areas. And so I ended up being here. And I think that's the most of yeah, I think that's the major reason. And but there are also some other reasons, like regarding when you're looking for jobs. I was an international student, and sponsorship is also kind of important as well. And when I was looking for pharma industry jobs, I think generally there are a lot less opportunities compared to tech. That's a matter of fact. And also they are not very friendly at least not as friendly as tech industry in sponsoring visas to the international students. So I think that's also some benefits working at tech industry, and you don't have to worry about those things at all. They will guarantee to, if they are willing to hire you, you don't have to worry about those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I can concur with what you said. Like visa, because I'm an international student as well, and not a lot of companies sponsor your H-1B or green card, and that's why Intel is very immigrant friendly. So that was also a major reason on why I decided to go to Intel.
Yeah, I am American citizen, so I don't have to deal with that. But one of my team members is halfway through the process, and 3M is sponsoring them, and they have a couple lawyers whose whole job is dealing with immigration. And from the sound of it, they're a bit slow and awkward, but the job is getting done.
Great, thank you all for sharing that. And for international students, I'm sure that's a relief to hear as well. Someone asked, also kind of follow up on that question, what degree of similarity, if at all, to your current roles and your thesis or PhD work did you have, or were you looking for when you were applying for jobs?
So I really liked the sort of processes that I was doing. I really liked coding and simulation and machine learning. I didn't really care about the subject area as much. My thesis work covered actually a fairly wide range of sort of chemical areas. So like I did want to use some of that knowledge and go into like materials rather than like go into pharmaceuticals where I didn't have any area knowledge. But I wasn't too concerned about getting anything like lined up with specific things I did in grad school. And I found that as a materials data scientist, my day-to-day is pretty similar. It's a lot of coding, it's a lot of reading literature and taking notes and doing simulations and coding things up. But basically every single project I'm working on is in a different chemical area. Like I've got some that's polymers, some that's hard materials, some areas of like looking at transfer reactions. So it's kind of all over the place. So that was about what I was looking for.
Yeah, for me, to be honest with you, because I'm an international student, I was applying for several jobs and I was ready to accept any job that I get. So I even up because I was an experimental researcher, I also applied for experimental jobs and got some on-site interviews. And in addition, I had applied to some startups where they did materials informatics. In general, I was applying to a wide variety of jobs, but now that I look back, I feel like I got this job because, in addition to having the extreme ultraviolet experience, and they wanted someone with both experimental and computational background. So I think it ended up being a good fit looking back, but I was not trying to look at anything that fits with my thesis because of the immigrant situation. I was just applying to any job that I would think I would get.
Yeah, for me, yeah, I guess probably my current role, probably not very similar to what I did in my PhD thesis at all. But I guess maybe I would say the research area or the business area right now, more accurate. They are different, but in terms of the methodologies or the technical skills that is required to complete the job, that's still, I would say, benefit a lot from my graduate school to be able to have more computational thinking, to learn the coding skills, developing models, and those kind of things are directly translated to my current role. Yeah, and I also tend to more thinking when you're looking for jobs, maybe just thinking more about what you would like to do in the long term, instead of just keep looking back what you did in your PhD and then how can I leverage the most what I have done in the last 5 years. But if you're thinking about it in the future, you're actually going to have like 30 years or 40 years or even longer of career, right? Just focus more on what you would like to do based on what your previous experience, and then you have some understanding in some particular subject or area. And then now you should think about what you would like to do in the future and what's your passion in the future, and then just building on top of toward the future and of what I was able to do in the past, and then find it that is aligned with what I was able to do before. So yeah, that's generally my philosophy when I'm looking for jobs too. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you who are maybe looking at a specific area or a niche area, in that case, you may find similarities, but majority of students that I've heard from or interacted with have mentioned the current job that they do doesn't really have a whole lot of overlap between their PhD work. And that's one of the skills, right? Being adaptable and flexible, and also being open to learning new things and trying things out is one of the things that is very important being a PhD student, that versatility as well. All right, thank you all for sharing your thoughts about that. So next question was, did your graduate school lab support you at all in your getting your job, or what kind of support did you have during your job search process?
Yeah, so my PI was Jeff Moore, and he's pretty supportive of people doing whatever they think is the best option for them career-wise. So a lot of his students go to industry or national labs or other such things, as well as academia jobs. In terms of support from him, it was pretty much a point where I was like, I think I'm ready to start looking for a job. And he was like, yeah, go for it. And then I kind of just did my own thing. But he's really supported doing internships and co-ops and things like that. And I did spend a year at Argonne National Lab as a graduate researcher, and that was really helpful because I learned a lot of things. And one of the things I learned was that I wanted to go to industry, not national lab. So that support to the ability to go outside and try things was really appreciated.
Yeah, so I worked in Josh's lab, and when I realized that I wanted to go into data science related job in maybe related to chemistry or materials, he was quite supportive of me applying for internships. And I actually did an internship in Citrin Informatics. It's a startup that specializes in materials informatics. So before I graduated, so in summer of 2021, I worked there for 3 months full time. And that's when I learned, okay, this is where I want to be in the tech industry. Here are the gaps that I have in my skills. And I need to go to a place where I can actually fill those gaps as well as learn it. So that was super helpful. And also the group that I'm currently at, we have several engineers from UIUC, and I actually networked and I handed over my resume to the hiring manager directly. So I did not apply. So because the alums helped me to give the resume to the hiring manager in my current group.
Yeah, my teacher was supportive.
Hey,
Right.
John Kai, your audio is kind of breaking, like really patchy.
Um, it's for
No, it's still kind of breaking off.
it's better now.
Yeah, a little bit better.
Okay, cool. Yeah, during my graduate school, we had like a yearly career goal review, and then we discussed what we wanted to do. I think in the first few years, I had no idea, so we didn't focus too much on that. But in the last 2 to 3 years, we do discuss a lot of like what kind of career you would like to pursue, and then my advisor, Professor Shukla, he basically, I think he developed a mindset for me, like what maybe just having a checklist to do, like for the maybe if you're exploring a computational chemist role or a machine learning engineering tech industry, what kind of skill sets you can develop in the lab. Then just have a checklist, and then, for example, have a project to do some coding work, and then have a project to do some machine learning to apply those to apply some machine learning in solving some research problem related to my thesis. And I think basically to develop a kind of portfolio or projects that can, at least within whatever can be supported within the lab, that you can align those experiences to your future jobs. And I think that's mindset and translate those mindsets into action. That really helped me to be able to find a job in the tech industry in the end. And yeah, I think I really appreciated that. But of course, it's still a different kind of industry compared to what I did before. So I do have to spend a lot of time learning additional stuff. I did take some like courses on Coursera. And I do, like when I'm actually in the job, I saw a lot of people who have similar background. They did either a coding boot camp, or maybe even just taking online master degrees from some universities to be able to learn more about specific things like computer science or machine learning or data science. So I think you cannot just entirely rely on your PhD lab to get you ready for a future job that you want to get. So I think it's still mostly on you. But I think it will be great to work with your advisor to develop a plan, at least whatever you can develop together to get yourself ready. And then, but still, majority of work will have to be from us, and then we have to initiate that to get resources and to be able to make yourself ready for the job.
Right, that was so well put. even though your advisor is there, a lot of it will depend on you, your interests, where you want to be, and then definitely communicating those with your advisor so that they can help in some ways develop a plan for you to get there. Awesome. So more questions in the chat, but again, I want to ask for those who are here, any more questions from you all? If you want to unmute yourself or something. Okay, so more questions to get to. I guess one question that came in earlier, was there a skill that you had wished you'd learned in grad school that currently maybe now you use in your role, or talking more about things that you should have picked up in grad school?
I think the biggest skill I've had to learn is one that would have been hard to learn in grad school, and that's how to speak to the business side of the company. You know, I've got quite good at making PowerPoints about science aimed at the academic community, and turns out that, you know, my boss's boss doesn't so much care about that, and would much rather know how it impacts the company and how it's going to make us money. So I'm still working on learning how to appropriately speak business in my presentations. So I guess if you have the opportunity to learn more about like different styles of communication, besides just the like highly scientific communication that is valued in, you know, chemistry department or chemical engineering, that would probably be useful. I would have made use of that if I had known it was going to be a thing I'd need.
Yeah, for me, I would say I wish I had learned more coding skills. Again, because I came from an experimental research group, so most of my time was done in experiments and then analyzing data sets. So I really wish I had taken the time in graduate school to take more courses, or like to take core classes in computer science department, because they are available for free for UIUC students. So just leveraging the resources that the university provides. And one thing is that, and another thing is learning how to set priorities properly. Basically, in industry, at least in my current job, I'm juggling several projects, and the turnaround time is pretty fast. Like I have to finish things very quickly, and I don't have the time to dive deep into a subject, just like I did in my PhD, where I had 5 years to work on something. So just trying to make sure that I deliver the projects on time and setting priorities properly, because in academia, we are more focused on like novelty and as I would say, just trying to get over the fact that the perfection is the enemy of the good, and just trying to deliver the projects as quickly as possible. Yeah.
I can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Nope. If you said you're gonna rejoin, maybe that's what I lip read. Yeah. All right. So we'll wait until he joins, but another question I had before was one of the participant asked, how difficult do you think it is to get a data science job when your major is computer science?
Depends on what kind of data science job you're applying for, I suspect. For what I do, there's a really big interest in chemists who can speak to the data science people and know what they mean, and to speak to the experimentalists and know what they mean. We have to do a lot of crosstalk between both sides, because we have data science specialists who build the more complex systems for us. And so, you know, if you want to go into chemical industry doing data science, if you can show that you know the chemistry and can code, that's a really big draw. If you want to go into tech, I suspect it's a little bit different.
Do we want to go back to Tronkai to see if the audio is working now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Awesome.
yeah.
So yeah, the last question was, forgot what the last question was.
Skills you wish you'd learned in grad school.
Right, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I also wanted to take more courses in like in computer science and machine learning, and then to prepare myself more ready for machine learning engineer type of role. I think that kind of field is just it's advancing so quickly, and I think it does require a solid understanding and also have a broad understanding of those different kind of concepts in data science and machine learning. So I think taking more courses would be helpful. And then probably if I can get to work on some research projects that's maybe related to machine learning and like developing some machine learning methodologies for research applications, that would be quite useful as well. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, as Aastha mentioned before, UIUC has the Coursera page. There's lots of free courses that are available to you. And also even with LinkedIn Learning, all UIUC students can get access to LinkedIn Learning for free. And I can share the link with you in the chat too. There's lots of Python courses, lots of CS types of courses that you can take there. So if you are interested in transitioning into tech or data science, take those classes, and a lot of those are self-paced, so you can take it based on your schedule and work on those on your own. And Aastha also shared a link in the chat. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I think it's different from the regular Coursera because that's the Coursera for Illinois, and you have to log in from your UIUC net ID and password. But there are different courses like Masters in Computer Science track, that the same online course that UIUC does for real students. You can actually take it for free from there. I never did that, but I wish I had done it.
Yeah, great. So this is the chat. This is the link to the LinkedIn Learning website. And here, once you join with your @Illinois email, you can actually connect to your actual LinkedIn account and pair it with it. So the LinkedIn will automatically recommend you some courses as well. So yeah, as we were talking about the next question, how difficult do you think is it to get a job in data science or tech with someone who is not a computer science major? Aastha, I guess it was your turn.
I would say it's pretty difficult, to be honest with you, unless you take the time to really develop your skills and cracking the coding interviews, because the coding interviews are pretty difficult. You have to prepare for the coding interviews a lot. So if you don't prepare for it, then you probably would not get it. So I'm not in tech. I am in the semiconductor industry, and my PhD was in semiconductor photophysics, and I did ultra fast spectroscopy. So I may not be the best person to answer that question because I'm still doing similar things to my something related to my PhD, but coding more. Maybe Chun Kai can answer that better than me.
Yeah, I would say it was not an easy process for me. So I think when I was first started looking for some internship opportunities, that's when I was like third year or fourth year. I just went to career fair and then started trying to talk to those people. And at that time, I feel I was not even like, I was not supposed to talk to them, because I would just assume they probably not going to talk to me because it's just a completely different industry. I'm not from computer science, but it turned out not. When I just hand over my resume to to them, they are interested, and then they're interested in learning about what I did during my PhD, and they're saying that some of them are relevant. Maybe a lot of them are alumni, and they'll just be nice to me. But maybe not. I think generally, if you're working on computational research, or if you're even working on experimental research, but you be able to demonstrate that you have some relevant experience, like you have done some relevant projects, either coding or some machine learning or data science related projects, then I mean your resume is a solid resume. It probably can prepare you. You should be able to get an interview at least. And then regarding the interview process, as Asha mentioned, I think it's not an easy process. You do have to spend tons of time to get yourself ready to be able to crack those interviews, like coding interviews. You have to practice a lot to be able to know all those algorithm and data structures. I spent, I don't know how many hours I have spent on those. So it's not easy, especially all the PhDs are busy and they have to, you have to spend 10 hours or even longer in the lab. And I would say it's not easy process for me. But those things are not like research problems. They're not as difficult as the research problem. As long as you spend time, you just go through them one by one, and you dedicate some portion of your time from your weekends maybe on those things, you will be able to crack it. And then similarly for other machine learning or data science areas, the coding, they ask coding interviews. They also ask a lot of maybe real world machine learning problems to you and ask you to develop a machine learning solution in like a 45 minutes interview. So it's not easy for me either. So, but if you take courses, if you develop a plan early, and then to learn those things early, and then to be able to understand how those interviews are like and how to prepare them, I'm sure we all can crack it. It's not hard, but the reality is that it's competitive, and especially if you are trying to apply for a job in tech right now, it's just almost impossible to get one. So to be honest, but I think things will improve, and then if you just continue to prepare yourself well and to get the necessary skill set, I don't think I think it should be easy for every one of you to get the interview, but to be able to crack the interview, you have to spend time on those. Yeah, there is no magic there. Yeah.
Yeah, you all talked about, the tech or those case interviews, and I'll get to that later, but I also wanted to make sure I address all the questions in the chat. So a student asked is that her understanding of tech is that people switch jobs frequently to either advance in their roles or careers or even pay. Is it similar with what each of you have experienced in each of your roles and areas?
So 3M isn't really a tech company, so mostly I don't have an answer to this, except that we do have a lot of trouble holding on to our software developers because 3M doesn't pay as well as most of the tech companies do for the software development roles. So we see a lot of turnover in those roles, but not as much over on my side of things.
Yeah, so Intel, I would say it's a hardware tech company, so it's not like the big tech FANG companies, but in general, people either move from our team because we do a lot of data science and image processing to other computational like image processing or AI ML research teams within Intel itself. So after working in our division for 4 or 5 years, they will move on to more computer science heavy research groups, or they move on to other tech companies. So the turnover rate in our team is also pretty high because a lot of people move to big tech companies like Amazon or Facebook.
Yeah, in tech industry, I guess it's very common people just switch jobs like after they're working a few months or even a year. Maybe I would say like 2 to 3 years is like more average. And then people switch jobs is pretty common, especially in the last few years, but less common this year for sure. And then I think the question is also asking about computational chemistry or data scientist industry. Yeah, I do came to know a lot. I had a lot of connections on LinkedIn, like when I was looking for jobs in the computational chemistry industry. I did notice that people in computational industry, they also switch jobs very often, especially nowadays. There are a lot of startups for computational chemistry jobs. And then I do see people like, it's just similar to tech industry. They switch jobs after 2 years and then they get promoted. Yeah, I think sometimes, for me personally, I switched job because I want to relocate to California, and that's could be the reason. And I think when people switching jobs, it could be just for a variety of reasons, whether they are looking, like for example, there's a more exciting computational chemistry startup, and then it's a good opportunity for them. They just switch their jobs. I think that's generally not necessarily a bad sign. I think it's sometimes maybe it's a good sign. Yeah.
Awesome. So next question for you all, especially for those who mentioned you were international students, could you please share more about the timeline of your job application, especially for students who will need a visa sponsorship after graduation? I'm sure Morgan can also speak to that.
Yeah, I can share my timeline. So I did summer after my 4th year, I attended 3M Rise, and then was invited to come apply after that, and also applied to other schools in the like summer on-campus recruiting. I mean, not other schools, other companies during on-campus recruiting. I had my job offer from 3M in mid-August, accepted it, and then defended the next March, started that April. So, and that 3M is usually looking, anyone within a year is usually kind of the cycle for them.
Yeah, for me as well, I did my internship at Citrine the summer before I graduated. So August 2021 was when I came back from Citrine, and that's when I realized I want to go to the tech industry, and I started applying for jobs. For fall of application, my goal was to make sure I learn what the interview process is like, and if I get selected, I would get more practice in like real interviews. And in the spring, where I defended in May 2022, I was actively applying for jobs more seriously. So the fall application was more for practice and trying to learn to crack the interviews, and in the spring was more for real job interviews. For Intel's timeline, I handed my resume in October, and then in December I had my first round interview, and in January I was invited for on-site, but at that time, because of COVID, we had virtual on-site where I had to do a thesis presentation, and I interviewed with 9 or 10 engineers on the same day. And then I got my offer in early March, and I defended on April 2022.
Yeah, for tech industry, I think generally all the companies hiring new grads during the fall season, and especially for big tech, they all started openings around July, August, or September, and then once the openings are open, then a lot of candidates just apply, and then they start the interview process immediately. And generally, what they do is that they have the head counts allocated for each team, and then whenever the head counts are filled, then they stop hiring. So I think generally my advice, if you're looking for tech jobs, is to start early, and then when you get an offer, you can join anytime within 12 months after you get the offer. So generally, it's not a problem if you start early, especially if you can get a job like 12 months before your defense. That's the best thing to have, I can guarantee you. And also, but there are also another round, like during the spring semester, like January, there are also a lot of openings as well. But I would generally encourage to start early, especially we're not from computer science and there are a lot of it's very competitive for tech jobs, although there are a lot of opportunities there. Maybe it's very common to see that on LinkedIn, any job opening, there are just like thousands applicants or hundreds applicants there. So start early. That's always going to be helpful. And I can also speak of pharma industry applications. I think that one is relatively. I think generally, they'll, from my experience at least, they tend to hire people who can join within a few months, like 3 months. Sometimes they think it's still taking too long. So I think it's not too urgent for pharmaceutical jobs. Maybe I think usually spring semester, that's the best time. And I applied a lot of pharmaceutical jobs in spring semester, and I got a lot of interviews. And yeah.
Yeah, great points. I just also wanted to add my career services perspective there. So as all of you mentioned, starting early is definitely key, but even if you're looking for industry positions or tech, obviously starting early, but typically all the recruiting happens a year out. So if you know around a year before that this is when you're thinking to graduate, we do have a lot of recruiting activities starting or happening in the summer. So that's a good time to start if you're graduating next summer. So yeah, starting a year and a half out is usually a good plan, no matter what industry, tech or pharma or others that you're interested in. But yeah, as you said, Tronkai, there's also loads of positions that hire, just in time or like closer to when they're looking for. So yeah, you might also find those types of opportunities. So going back to my question, as all of you had mentioned, thinking about, the tech interview or the case-specific interviews, can you talk more about your preparation for those? What type of resources did you use to help yourself prepare for those types of interviews?
So I did study for coding interview with a Code Academy course. And then 3M ended up not actually having me do a proper code interview because they were looking for a sort of scientist position. But I did get to spend an hour with some of my now coworkers talking through the logic of an algorithm. And they basically asked me which ones I had experience working with, and then chose one that I said I hadn't had any experience with. And we talked through like what the logic was. And so, I'd done a lot of thinking about algorithms and studying about them with a Code Academy course, and also working through one of the O'Reilly, I think, Machine Learning with Python book. And so that was really helpful for that, but I didn't have to do like a actual code interview where they looked at any of my actual coding.
Yeah, I prepared taking a Coursera code class on data structures and algorithms. And I was also trying to do some lit code, but I didn't finish all of it's impossible to finish all of them. In my interview for Intel, I did have 2 interviewers who actually asked me to write a Python code on the fly. So where I had to share the screen and then I had to write the Python code. That was pretty much it on my on-site interview. Out of the 10 interviewers, most of them asked me about my research, but 2 or 3 of them actually gave me a problem and I had to write a code on Microsoft Word, or I had to share a screen and write the code.
Yeah, I guess speaking of tech interviews, you would have to sharpen your coding skills. And then the only thing, I took courses on Coursera on algorithm and data structures, and then did a bunch of coding problems on LeetCode. And then what else? Taking some courses on machine learning type of stuff as well. And then I guess maybe a good advice could be to do some mock interviews with your friends who have worked in tech industry. And that's really can help you to get familiar with a tech interview, especially if you have never done that before. And maybe also if you can apply for some internships, at least try to have some interviews beforehand. That would be helpful to know what it's really looking like to do an interview. Nothing is better than a real interview. And that's actually what I did. When I was looking for jobs, I think my first interview I got was to interview Google, and then I spent like almost 2 weeks. Just I take 2 weeks off and then just do coding problems there, and then trying to get myself ready for the interview. But still, I didn't do well when I was first doing the first couple of interviews. So that's why what I said to start early, to prepare that early instead of after you get an interview and then you spend a lot of time trying to crack it. And that would not be a best practice. But if you can get started early to know the process in advance, and then get yourself ready, and then whenever you get the interview, you can do the interview immediately, then that will always put you in a better position. And then to have some mock interviews, or even to have some real interviews to understand the process, and then really treat every interview seriously. And because I didn't realize at the beginning, I thought I could get a lot of interviews, but it turned out, especially after I get my first interview with Google, I thought I could get any interview with any other tech companies, but it turned out not. I didn't get many interviews after that. I started worrying about, I started panicking a little bit as well. But since it just worked well in the end. But I would say just take every interview seriously, no matter whether that's your dream company or not. Just prepare well, and then you will learn a lot. You will benefit a lot by taking it seriously. Yeah.
Great. That's all great advice. So I think we've gone through all the questions in the chat, but what other questions do we have from our participants in the last 10 minutes of our session here today?
I'm just curious, in working in a company, do you also try publishing a paper related to your work in the company?
So I actually last week had a meeting where one of my collaborators was like, do you think this work is publishable? To which my answer was like, what I've done is like of a quality to be published, but it's not a good enough story by itself. But, you know, if you're interested, sure, we can pull something together and combine the computational and experimental results. 3M, it really varies by area, how interested they are in publishing. In this case, that was a biopharma project, and so for filtration, and the pharmaceutical companies love publications that they can point at when they're trying to qualify their things. So there's a big push on that side of things. Whereas other things, you know, I'm working on one project that has trade secrets, so we're probably never going to publish anything about that. So it's a mix.
Yeah, in my team, I think a lot of senior engineers or principal engineers have published a lot in the SPIE, or like the optics journal. And even in Intel, there is a department called components research, which actually does core R&D and similar to academia. So the people in components research publish a lot. So if you want to publish, even being at industry, components research might be the department that you would want to, but it's very competitive to get into because you would need a lot of papers and patents to be part of that team. So it all depends on which team you are at in terms of publications.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same in tech industry. There are a lot of pure research teams that publish a lot, and then their hiring bar almost the same as academia as well for top tech companies. But it's difficult to get into, especially even for computer science PhDs, I would say, for some of the top research positions. Yeah, and it also varies company to company. I think at Amazon, it has less priority for publishing, but for Google or Facebook, I think some other tech company, they do care publishing. But we do have also, at Amazon, we do have some internal conferences, and we write publications just internally. And I guess there are also some copyright issues or don't want to make those things public outside of the company as well. So
Yeah, to follow up
thank you.
that, thank you for reminding me, Chunkai. We do a ton of internal publishing. So we have, like, I'm involved in multiple poster sessions every year, and right before this talk, I was proofreading an internal report. So like we do a lot of that kind of work, but most of it doesn't get published outside the company.
Yeah, most of the I think the company also encourage people to go to conference, and you don't have to present, and then just for you to learn as well. But of course, if you want to publish, then that could be a good thing too. And just some things to consider, like if you publish a paper in your PhD, then it makes you ready to defend. But if you publish a paper in industry, it does not necessarily add too much to your performance review. So that could be another thing to consider. So if you're really excited about publishing, I guess you can work with your manager to get something published as long as you complied with the company policy. So.
Oh, thank you all. Any final questions from students? All right, so in the last 7 minutes or so, just kind of last minute thoughts that you all have for people who are interested in transitioning into data science or tech or computational types of roles. What last minute advice do you have for them? And yeah, just that.
I think the two things I'd recommend is, first of all, do informational interviews. I know that it's horrible to write cold emails or cold LinkedIn messages to people, but it really is worth it to have a good conversation with someone about what they actually do, where you can, really ask all your questions. The other thing is to look for opportunities like 3M Rise. There are other ones at other companies where even if it's not a hiring event, you get to get in front of people and talk about your research. It's a really good opportunity to make connections and to get your name known before the hiring managers are looking at your resume.
Yeah, my suggestion would be, I don't want to repeat what Morgan said. Definitely do information interviews. I would say start early. Start early. Just apply for jobs. As Chunkai mentioned, apply for jobs because if you get the interview, it will force you to prepare for interviews. And as you move along in the interview process, you'll get better at it, and you may not land the job in your first or second interview, but as you keep doing interviews, you'll get better at it, and things will end well. But I suggest start early and take your interviews seriously and as a learning experience.
Yeah, I would say probably just try to network with people, and then if you can, try to get an internship and to really understand what this kind of job is like, because more or less this is going to be different from what we usually do in graduate school, right? So I think to be able to experience it, to know what it's like, and so that you will have a better idea whether this is the job that you want. And also throughout the process, you can get an internship that pretty much a lot of the tech company, they are hiring new grads through giving return offers nowadays. They don't directly give interview to new grads. At least it's a less portion of those. So if you can do an interview, do an internship, you very likely can get a return offer, and then you don't have to go through the sometimes can be painful and stressful job search process. That's a good plus. And also you can really understand what this industry is like and what this kind of job is like. And I think that's going to be helpful. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for those amazing insights. As you all mentioned, networking and informational interviews. Would you all be open for our current students with connecting with you on LinkedIn and maybe even doing some of these informational interviews? Awesome. I see nods, so that's great. So I guess students, you can add them on LinkedIn and connect with them that way. But to just end it all, I want to thank you all so much for your time, for all your words of wisdom and your knowledge. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your advice with our students. And I'm sure they all agree and want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you for being a great moderator for us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And thank you
thank
to all the
you.
students as well for asking these engaging questions.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. Virtual round of applause for all of you, but I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day and weekend. And thanks again so much for being here.